The impact of horror films on popular culture and society. Exploring how horror films shape societal fears and cultural narratives over time. Horror movies have been a staple of popular culture for decades, providing us with a thrilling way to confront and release our deepest fears in a controlled environment. But have you ever stopped to think about the impact that these films have on our collective psyche? Do they simply reflect our deepest fears, or do they actually have the power to shape and manipulate them? Why do we love horror? The psychological mechanics of fear. Horror films have maintained their grip on our collective imagination for over a century, evolving from the German expressionist nightmares of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari in 1920 to the socially conscious terrors of modern films like Nope in 2022. This endurance raises profound questions about the relationship between cinema and our deepest fears, anxieties, and societal tensions. The psychological mechanics of horror cinema operate on multiple levels, engaging both our primitive fear responses and higher cognitive functions. When we watch horror movies, our brains and bodies respond in remarkably complex ways. The amygdala, our fear center, activates just as it would in response to real threats, triggering the release of adrenaline, cortisol, and other stress hormones. Yet we remain safely in our seats, experiencing what researchers call controlled fear, a paradoxical state where we're simultaneously terrified and aware of our safety. How horror reflects society, historical and cultural evolution. The evolution of horror themes throughout cinema history provides a fascinating mirror to societal concerns and cultural shifts. The 1950s saw a wave of mutation-themed horror films like them, and Godzilla, reflecting atomic age anxieties about nuclear warfare and technological advancement gone wrong. These oversized creatures represented threats that seemed too massive to comprehend or control, embodying the era's existential dread of nuclear annihilation. Moving into the 1960s and 70s, horror cinema turned its gaze inward with films like Rosemary's Baby and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. These works reflected growing anxieties about gender roles, bodily autonomy, and the dissolution of traditional family structures. The horror moved from external monsters to threats within our own homes and communities, mirroring societal upheaval and changing social norms. Night of the Living Dead 1968, with its groundbreaking depiction of race and survival, introduced themes of social tension and disintegration, cementing George A. Romero's work as a cultural touchstone. From slashers to social commentary, the evolution of modern horror. The 1980s ushered in the golden age of slasher films, coinciding with rising concerns about youth culture, sexuality, and moral decay. Films like Halloween and Friday the 13th often punished characters for transgressions, particularly sexual activity or substance use, reflecting conservative anxieties about changing social mores. These films created a complex moral universe where survival often depended on adherence to traditional values. The Shining, 1980, expanded the psychological dimensions of horror, with its exploration of isolation, family dysfunction, and the descent into madness becoming an enduring metaphor for societal and personal breakdown. The 1990s and early 2000s saw horror grappling with technological anxiety and self-awareness. The Ring and its American remake captured growing unease about technology's role in our lives, while Scream ushered in an era of self-aware horror that commented on the genre itself, reflecting a more media-literate audience. These films acknowledged viewers' growing sophistication while finding new ways to terrify them. Alien, 1979, bridged the gap between science fiction and horror, introducing a biomechanical nightmare that explored themes of corporate greed, bodily violation, and the terror of the unknown. Contemporary horror, addressing modern fears and anxieties. Contemporary horror has increasingly turned its lens toward systemic societal issues. Jordan Peele's Get Out masterfully addresses racism and cultural appropriation, while The Babadook explores mental health and grief with haunting precision. It Follows creates a powerful metaphor for sexual anxiety and trauma, while Host captures the isolation and technology dependence that characterized the COVID-19 era. Midsommar delves into relationship toxicity and cultural otherness, demonstrating horror's continuing ability to address complex social themes. Crafting fear, the technical art of horror cinema. The technical elements of creating fear in cinema have evolved into a sophisticated art form. Sound design plays a crucial role, employing techniques such as infrasound, very low-frequency sounds below human hearing, to create feelings of unease and discomfort. Sudden dynamic contrasts trigger startle responses, while strategic use of dissonance and silence creates psychological tension. Visual psychology is equally important, with filmmakers using techniques like the uncanny valley effect, negative space, Dutch angles, and subliminal imagery to manipulate viewer response. Horror's cultural legacy and future directions. Horror films have left an indelible mark on our cultural lexicon, contributing numerous terms and concepts that we use to describe real-world phenomena. Terms like zombie-like behavior, gaslighting, and final girl have transcended their origins to become part of everyday discourse. The influence of horror extends beyond cinema, affecting video game design, music videos, advertising, social media content, and even political messaging. Looking to the future, horror continues to evolve with technology and changing social concerns. Virtual and augmented reality are creating more immersive experiences, while AI-generated content opens new possibilities for uncanny experiences. Interactive horror narratives are emerging through streaming platforms, and new subgenres addressing climate anxiety and pandemic fears reflect our contemporary concerns. The enduring power of horror. Modern audiences have become increasingly sophisticated in their understanding of horror conventions, leading to more subversive storytelling approaches and greater emphasis on psychological over physical horror. Social commentary has become more integral to the genre, while technical and narrative expectations continue to rise. This evolution reflects viewers' growing media literacy and desire for more complex, meaningful engagement with horror themes. Horror films serve multiple psychological and social functions in our society. They help us process collective trauma, explore taboo subjects safely, build psychological resilience, create shared cultural experiences, and provide cathartic release. In an increasingly complex world, they continue to evolve as a vital medium for processing our fears, examining our values, and understanding our changing society. Understanding horror films helps us better comprehend not just our fears, but our capacity to face them, process them, and perhaps even master them through the safe distance of artistic expression. As we continue to face new societal challenges and anxieties, horror cinema will undoubtedly continue to evolve, providing both a mirror to our fears and a means of confronting them. Each of these films represents a significant evolution in how horror cinema approaches fear, social commentary, and audience expectations. Their influence extends beyond mere scares to affect how we discuss social issues, approach psychological trauma, and understand our own fears. The continued relevance of these works demonstrates horror's unique ability to address societal anxieties while pushing the boundaries of cinematic storytelling. Here's my list of what I think are the top 14 horror films with the biggest psychological and cultural impact on society, along with detailed reasoning and examples for each. Let me know what you think. 1. The Exorcist, 1973. William Friedkin's film transcended the horror genre to become a legitimate cultural phenomenon that forced mainstream society to confront religious faith in a modern context. Reports of audiences fainting, vomiting, and experiencing extreme psychological distress during screenings demonstrated the raw power of cinema to affect viewers physically and mentally. The film's impact on religious discourse was profound. It sparked serious theological discussions about evil and possession in contemporary society. The character of Regan MacNeil became a reference point for possession in popular culture, while the film's practical effects set new standards for horror visualization. Even today, films dealing with possession inevitably draw comparisons to The Exorcist. Psychological impact. Regarded as one of the scariest films ever made, The Exorcist delves into themes of faith, possession, and the fragility of the human spirit. Audiences reported fainting and vomiting in theaters due to the intense psychological terror, leading to nationwide debates about its effects on mental health. Cultural impact. Sparked a renewed interest in the supernatural and exorcism practices, leading to a surge in religious discussions during the 1970s. Influenced countless possession films, The Conjuring, Hereditary. Example: the film's iconic spinning head scene became a cultural touchstone for horror imagery. 2. Psycho, 1960. Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece fundamentally changed how audiences experience horror films and revolutionized cinema itself. The shocking death of the protagonist Marion Crane 30 minutes into the film broke established conventions of storytelling and created a new level of audience uncertainty. Suddenly, no character was safe. The infamous shower scene, with its brilliant editing and Bernard Herrmann's screeching violin score, has become a cultural touchstone referenced in countless films and media. Psycho also brought psychological horror into the mainstream, making Norman Bates a prototype for the complex, disturbed antagonist. The film's exploration of mental illness, though dated by modern standards, opened conversations about psychology and trauma that continue to influence horror cinema. Psychological impact. Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece shocked audiences with its depiction of mental illness and the unexpected death of its protagonist. It introduced the psychological thriller as a legitimate subgenre, forcing viewers to confront their discomfort with the human mind's darker corners. Cultural impact. Redefined cinematic storytelling with its twist ending and unorthodox narrative structure. Revolutionized film censorship by breaking taboos around nudity, violence, and psychological themes. Example: the infamous shower scene has been endlessly parodied and referenced, becoming a symbol of horror itself. 3 Jaws, 1975. Steven Spielberg's masterful thriller turned the simple act of swimming into a source of terror, instilling a fear of the unknown lurking beneath the surface. The suspenseful pacing, unforgettable score, and groundbreaking effects created a cultural phenomenon that forever changed summer blockbusters and public perceptions of sharks. Psychological impact. Instilled a deep fear of the ocean and sharks, even in people who had never been near the sea. Created a pervasive sense of dread by using suspenseful music and the unseen threat of the shark. Cultural impact. Coined the term summer blockbuster and redefined how films were marketed. Contributed to the demonization of sharks, influencing public perception and conservation efforts negatively. Example: shark attacks saw increased media coverage after the film, despite their rarity. 4. The Shining, 1980. Stanley Kubrick's haunting adaptation of Stephen King's novel explores the descent into madness within the isolation of a snowbound hotel. Blending surreal imagery with psychological horror, it tapped into primal fears of family dysfunction and mental instability. Its ambiguity and chilling performances have cemented its place as one of the greatest horror films of all time. Psychological impact. Explored themes of isolation, madness, and familial disintegration, deeply unsettling viewers. Its ambiguous ending and surreal imagery left audiences questioning reality. Cultural impact. Elevated the horror genre with Stanley Kubrick's artistic vision, blending psychological terror with high art. Inspired countless analyses, from theories about historical trauma to critiques of toxic masculinity. Example: the phrase "here's Johnny" became a cultural phenomenon, even outside horror circles. 5. Get Out, 2017. Jordan Peele's directorial debut revolutionized how horror films approach social commentary, particularly regarding race relations in America. The film created a new template for social horror that addresses systemic racism through genre conventions. Its success demonstrated that horror films could be both commercially successful and critically acclaimed while dealing with serious social issues. The film's concepts of the sunken place and microaggressions entered popular discourse, while its approach to social commentary influenced numerous subsequent films. Psychological impact. Brought racial microaggressions and systemic racism to the forefront of horror, making viewers confront social issues in a visceral way. Created a sense of unease by exposing the horrors of the liberal facade in modern society. Cultural impact. Redefined horror as a tool for social commentary. Inspired discussions about race relations and systemic oppression, reaching audiences beyond the horror genre. Example: the sunken place became a metaphor for marginalization, widely used in popular culture and political discourse. 6. Halloween, 1978. John Carpenter's film codified many slasher genre conventions while elevating them through superior cinematography and characterization. Michael Myers became the template for the unstoppable killer, while Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode established the final girl archetype. The film's exploration of suburban fear and sexual politics influenced countless imitators, while Carpenter's minimalist score demonstrated how music could enhance horror without overwhelming it. Halloween's impact on teen-oriented horror and seasonal horror films continues to this day. Psychological impact. Popularized the fear of an unstoppable, faceless killer, sparking nightmares about home invasions and vulnerability. Its minimalistic score and Michael Myers' emotionless mask tapped into primal fears. Cultural impact. Launched the slasher subgenre and influenced countless films. Friday the 13th, Scream. cemented the final girl trope in horror, sparking debates about gender and survival. Example: Jamie Lee Curtis became an icon of resilience, inspiring later heroines in horror. 7. A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Wes Craven's supernatural slasher introduced Freddy Krueger, a killer who invades dreams and blurs the line between reality and nightmares. This concept made even sleep feel unsafe, creating a deep psychological unease. With its inventive kills and exploration of suppressed fears, the film became a cultural touchstone in horror cinema. Psychological impact introduced the concept of a killer who invades dreams, blurring the line between reality and fantasy. Explored the subconscious and the fears we suppress, making sleep itself feel dangerous. Cultural impact elevated Freddy Krueger to pop culture status, blending horror with dark humor. Reflected fears of adolescence, guilt, and intergenerational conflict. Example: the film's tagline, "Don't fall asleep," became a chilling warning, reinforcing the fear of vulnerability. 8. The Blair Witch Project, 1999. This revolutionary film created the found footage genre as we know it and demonstrated how viral marketing could transform movie promotion. Its documentary style and minimal special effects created a new template for realistic horror that emphasized suggestion over explicit violence. The film's marketing campaign, which presented it as actual found footage, created a new paradigm for movie promotion in the internet age. Its influence extends beyond horror to reality television and social media content creation. Psychological impact used a found footage format to create an unsettling sense of realism, leaving viewers questioning if it was real or fictional. Played on primal fears of being lost, helpless, and hunted in the wilderness. Cultural impact revolutionized low-budget filmmaking and marketing, demonstrating that simplicity could be terrifying. Ushered in the found footage subgenre, Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield. Example: its viral marketing campaign blurred fiction and reality, making it one of the earliest examples of internet-based film promotion. 9. Rosemary's Baby, 1968. Roman Polanski's psychological thriller fundamentally changed how horror films approach supernatural themes in domestic settings. The film tapped into growing anxieties about pregnancy, bodily autonomy, and women's rights during a period of significant social change. Its portrayal of gaslighting and institutional betrayal created a template for psychological horror that emphasizes growing paranoia and isolation. The film's influence can be seen in countless works dealing with pregnancy horror and domestic conspiracies, while its subtle approach to supernatural horror influenced films like The Witch and Hereditary. Psychological impact explored fears of pregnancy, bodily autonomy, and the loss of control over one's life. Delved into paranoia and betrayal, creating a slow-burning sense of dread. Cultural impact challenged societal norms about motherhood and women's roles. Inspired debates about reproductive rights and the occult. Example: its influence can be seen in modern films about motherhood and bodily horror, Hereditary, The Witch. 10. Hereditary, 2018. Ari Aster's feature debut took psychological horror to chilling new heights by delving deep into themes of grief, family trauma, and inherited curses. The film's slow-burning tension, shocking moments, and emotionally devastating story left audiences rattled. It redefined modern horror, blending traditional scares with profound character exploration. Psychological impact pushed boundaries by exploring themes of grief, family trauma, and the inevitability of fate. Its shocking imagery and emotional intensity left audiences deeply disturbed. Cultural impact solidified A24's dominance in the horror genre, blending art house aesthetics with traditional scares. Inspired a new wave of psychological horror that prioritizes character depth over cheap thrills. Example: the head scene shocked audiences and became one of the most discussed moments in recent horror history. 11. Night of the Living Dead, 1968. George A. Romero's independent film defined the modern zombie genre, combining social commentary with visceral horror. Its bleak tone and shocking ending challenged traditional horror tropes, while reflecting the turbulent socio-political landscape of the 1960s. The film's DIY ethos proved that low-budget filmmaking could create unforgettable cinema. Psychological impact introduced a sense of dread and nihilism, with characters trapped by an ever-growing horde of the undead. Its unrelenting tension and bleak conclusion left audiences shaken, emphasizing the fragility of civilization. Cultural impact pioneered the zombie genre, influencing countless films, TV shows, and video games, The Walking Dead, 28 Days Later, tackled themes of racism, consumerism, and societal collapse, giving horror a platform for deeper commentary. Example: the image of a shambling zombie breaking into the house became a foundational trope for the genre. 12. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Tobe Hooper's gritty and relentless film pushed the boundaries of terror with its documentary-like aesthetic and shocking brutality. Centering on a family of cannibals, it created one of horror's most iconic villains, Leatherface. The film's themes of isolation, moral decay, and madness redefined what audiences could endure on screen. Psychological impact. Its relentless tension and sense of helplessness left viewers feeling trapped alongside the characters. Avoiding excessive gore, it relied on suggestion and atmosphere to evoke visceral fear. Cultural impact. Established the backwoods horror subgenre, influencing countless films like The Hills Have Eyes and Wrong Turn. Leatherface and the chainsaw became enduring symbols of horror, referenced and parodied across pop culture. Example: the film's closing scene of Leatherface wildly swinging his chainsaw remains one of the most haunting final moments in cinema. 13. The Ring, 2002. Gore Verbinski's remake of the Japanese classic Ring brought J-horror to global prominence, introducing audiences to the terrifying tale of a cursed videotape. The film combined haunting visuals with a slow-burn narrative, creating a pervasive sense of dread. Its imagery, particularly Samara crawling out of the TV, became instantly iconic. Psychological impact. Played on the universal fear of the unknown and the inescapable inevitability of death. Introduced the unsettling concept of technology harboring supernatural forces, making viewers second-guess their trust in everyday objects. Cultural impact. Popularized Japanese horror in Western markets, leading to a wave of remakes like The Grudge and Dark Water. Revitalized the supernatural horror genre in the early 2000s with its unique atmosphere and compelling narrative. Example: the phrase 7 days became synonymous with impending doom, immortalized in pop culture references. 14. Alien, 1979. Ridley Scott's masterpiece blended sci-fi and horror to create a claustrophobic, nerve-shredding experience. Centered on the crew of the Nostromo, the film introduced the xenomorph, a creature that has since become one of the most iconic monsters in cinema. Its slow-building tension and shocking bursts of violence set a new standard for the genre. Psychological impact. Explored primal fears of bodily invasion and the terror of being hunted in an inescapable environment. Created a suffocating atmosphere where survival feels increasingly impossible. Cultural impact. Redefined the sci-fi genre by proving that horror and science fiction could coexist with stunning results. Made Sigourney Weaver's Ripley one of the first true action heroines, inspiring a generation of strong female protagonists. Example: the chestburster scene shocked audiences and became one of the most iconic and parodied moments in film history. These films not only scared audiences, but also left lasting impressions on the collective psyche and society as a whole. Each contributed to shaping the horror genre and the way we confront our fears. Conclusion: the power of horror. Horror movies are not just entertainment. They are complex, multi-layered explorations of our deepest fears and societal anxieties. By examining how these films reflect and shape our culture, we gain valuable insights into the human psyche. So, what do you think? Are horror movies shaping your fears, or are they simply holding up a mirror to what's already there? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of horror, don't forget to check out my next video, where we explore the real-life inspirations behind some of the scariest films ever made.